Hey, first graders. Okay, we're going to do our last science lesson. Okay, I will come back next week and show you some of our seeds and how I harvest the seeds from the pod. Um, but that'll be next week, and that won't be new learning information. That'll be just kind of a fun activity for you to see. Okay, so our last lesson we did, lesson 7, was all about fruits. And when we were talking about fruits, we talked a little bit about adaptations. Do you remember that word? Do you remember what it means? Okay, adaptations are little things that living things do to make it easier for them to survive. Okay, and since one of the goals of plants is to create more plants, they've had to figure out ways to let their seeds survive and continue to go on and grow into another plant. Okay, and while we've talked a lot about what plants need to start growing, we kind of forgot one element. And tell me if you think this is important. It's important for plants to have room to grow. Do you feel like you need room to grow as well? Okay. Is it going to work very well for you to be really squished together with other people all the time? No, you need to be able to spread out and have enough air and enough water for yourself. And the same thing is true for plants. Okay, and so seeds need to get away from their parent plant so that they can continue to grow. Because if they all stayed right where they came from, right next to the parent plant, they'd never be able to really grow, or only just a couple of them would be able to grow. Okay, so we are going to look today at different ways that those seeds go on to be able to grow. Okay, so I have some different seeds here that I collected. I just went for a walk, just right around my neighborhood, and I found quite a few different seeds. And you know what I was thinking though? I should have gone for a walk out by the school because think of the times that you've been out at recess and you've come back in and you've had one of those little burrs that's hooked onto your clothes, maybe your sock or sometimes even your hair. Okay, it has little tiny hooks, kind of like Velcro, where it gets stuck onto you. Okay, and that is one of the adaptations that plants have come up with to be able to get around to different places and travel because they don't have legs to walk around on, right? So they've had to find different ways to travel. And that is one. So I don't have any birds with me, but I bet you can all picture those birds that we've found out at recess sometimes, okay? But let's look at some of these other seeds I have, okay? So like I said, these are all just seeds I've come up with while I've gone out on a walk. And you know what? There were a couple other seeds that I found, and I'm not sure where I put them. I went searching for them, and I'm not sure where they are, but I think we've got a good number here. Okay. So look at these and tell me, think about which ones you recognize. Okay. Do these look familiar to you? Are these seeds you have seen before? Whoa. Okay. These are all some different seeds that I found just here in my neighborhood. So if you have had a chance to go looking for seeds in your neighborhood, then I want you to also go through them and think about what adaptations they might have created, okay? So that they can go on and grow. Okay, so looking at these, can you think how any of these seeds might get from one place to another? And almost all of these seeds are seeds that came from trees. There's one exception. Do you know which one did not come from a tree? Okay, right here. And it's kind of fallen apart. Ooh, but what is that? Okay, this is a dandelion, isn't it? That's gone white. So this one is not yellow anymore. It has gone white. And all of these little fluffs that have come from it are carrying the seed. So If I look at this really closely, let's see if I can get this. I don't think it's going to let me show it very well. Okay, well, do you see that little dark spot on it? That is the seed. Okay, and so that seed is being carried around by this bit of fluff on its end. Okay, and when we get all of those seeds together and all the fluff on them, here you can see all the dark spots, okay, that are still connected to the flower. When you get those all together, that's what makes it look like that puffy white ball that we see out in the yard. Okay, it's lots of little seeds with all those black spots, those are the seeds, with their adaptation. So what is their adaptation? What is the purpose of their adaptation? So dandelions have come up with this fluff that connects to their seeds. And what does that help them to do? It helps the seeds be carried by the wind. Okay, so that is one way seeds are able to travel. So they're able to travel by air, be carried by the wind. And sometimes in the springtime you'll be outside and they will seem to be caught and flying through the air. And that's just more seeds coming from certain trees that have similar adaptations as this dandelion. Okay, so looking here, do you see any other seeds that might have been carried by or might be have adaptations that help it to be carried by the wind? Okay, how about these? Okay, these are similar. This one is older, dried out. This one has two connected together. How many of you have ever taken these and flung them through the air and tried to get them to spin around like a helicopter? Okay, have you ever done that? Kind of fun to see how they get carried by the wind. Okay, this one is going to fly through the wind a little bit differently, but it still has the adaptation of having like the stiff part that comes out with this really light part that the air can get caught on that can push it around. Okay, so maple trees are another plant that have come up with an adaptation that allows their seeds to get dispersed. Okay, we're going to come back to these in just a second. Okay, these are from another tree, and again, they've got these outside edges that are very, very light, very easy to lift, and the air is able to carry these around. And then here in the middle, it has, you can kind of see it bumps out a little bit right there in the middle, and that's where the actual seed is. So this is the carrier that brings the seed around. Okay, so those are some examples of seeds that get carried by the wind. That is one way that seeds get carried around. Okay, so another way seeds get dispersed. So we talked about how burrs and any seed that have little hooks on them that will get stuck to clothing and things. Those will also get stuck to animal fur, just like they get stuck in hair. Okay, and that is one of our adaptations. We've talked now about how some seeds get carried by the wind, okay, and air carries them, and that's our second adaptation. Okay, our third adaptation, I mentioned briefly last week, and my example was a coconut. Do you remember what you learned about a coconut last week? Okay, I was talking about it because we eat it like a fruit, but how does it go from one place to another? It floats. Okay, so there are certain seeds that can be carried by water, and that is how they spread the seeds from the parent plant to find a new space where it can grow. Okay. So these were had some little berries starting to form on it. You know, they got so dried up, you really can't see it anymore. Okay, so this had little circular fruits on it that were being carried, and that goes along with the other fruits that we've talked about last time, because we talked about how animals like to eat fruit, don't they? And just like people like to eat fruit. And when the animals are eating fruit, the seeds go inside of them. And what do they end up doing? They end up pooping the seeds out. Okay? And so that lets the seeds go somewhere new away from the parent plant. Okay, so there's 4 ways that seeds get dispersed. And then the 5th way is that there are certain seeds, certain plants that disperse their seeds by flinging them off of the plant and off of the tree. Okay, so here I have a couple of pine cones that I picked up outside, which had been pushed off of the tree, right? Flung from the tree. They'd been dropped by the tree. And the pine cones carry the seeds. The pine cone is the house for the seeds. Okay, so when the pine cones get released from the tree, sometimes they go rolling down the sidewalk, rolling down the street. Sometimes they get picked up and moved. And sometimes they're just dropped and they end up growing just a few feet away, okay? But they find their own space to be able to grow as well. So just being able to fling the fruit from the tree, fling the seeds from the tree, is another adaptation. Now, I saved this one for last because I have to tell you a funny story that happened, okay? So this was hanging on a tree, and I'll post a picture of the tree that showed a bunch of these on it, okay? And most of the ones that were big, well, most of the ones I could reach were still really small. See how tiny that one is? Okay, so most of the ones I could reach were only that big. So I was just gonna get those and just use the picture. But then I saw this one, okay? And this one was down low and I could reach it. So I reached up to grab it and I put my fingers all the way around it and pulled it off. And when I pulled it off, a whole bunch of the seeds went poof, and I ended up with a whole bunch of seeds in my hair. Okay, so if I have it going this way, but if I lift it up, see how it's left a whole bunch of like little hairs there? And it is hollow inside. Okay, so this was a circular, just like a ball hanging on the tree. And I had no idea that when I pulled it off, it would start breaking apart. And you know what? That was one of its adaptations, is that when it comes off the tree, it doesn't keep its shape. So this one's interesting because it gets flung from the tree, and then, see, I'm breaking it apart because you can see as I break it apart, we end up with each seed. That's one of the seeds, okay? And it looks like it would be able to be carried by the wind. It's got the little hairs and stuff on it, similar to our dandelion, okay? So, and just the way it was when it came off the tree and how the seeds just went poof all over the place made me think that this particular plant, and I wish I knew what kind of tree this was, but this particular plant has created 2 adaptations to help disperse seeds. It flings the seeds from the plant in these little balls, but then when it does that, the ball seems to break apart and the wind is able to carry the seeds even further. So I found that very interesting. Okay, so I want you to work on collecting some of your own seeds and looking at them and asking yourself, how are these seeds going to get carried from one place to another? And you might find that some have more than one adaptation. Okay, looking back at the maple tree seeds, okay, looking at these little helicopters, these right here are going to also be able to float, not just be blown in the wind. And I want you to also notice that this one right here is still pretty flat. Okay, the part that bumps up there in the middle is not the seed. That is just where it's hooking to this little stem piece, this little branch piece that hooks to the tree, and where the two halves come together. I would actually break this apart, and inside of each one of these is where a seed would grow. However, right now, these seeds are not mature. So these seeds, I took these off of the tree before they were ready to actually be dispersed. Now, this is from a different maple tree, and you can see this one is much thicker in here because this seed was ready. So this one I found on the ground because it had already blown off of the tree, where this one was still hooked onto the tree. Okay, so one thing we are looking for on our plants is not only for the fruit to be there and for the seeds to be growing, but that the seeds are mature. So that's part of the reason I haven't taken any of the fruits off of our plants yet. They are still on there. You probably noticed, though, in the last couple pictures that the plants are starting to die and the leaves are starting to dry out and the flowers that were still there have dried out. But the seed pods are still quite moist. Okay, they have not dried out yet. They still are very bendable. They don't crack when you try to bend it. Because that is where all the energy that's left in those plants as the plant starts to die is going to those seeds and helping them mature. So now, from now on, when I send you pictures of what's happening to our plants, I'm not going to be showing you the whole plant. I'm just going to be showing you the seed pods so that you can watch what happens to them as the plant dies and the seeds mature, okay? Now, when the seeds are mature and they're ready to be harvested, they will be dormant. Okay, and you might remember way back in our first lessons, we talked about how a dormant seed is a seed that's still asleep. It's not going to start growing there in the plant. Okay, it's going to stay there and wait until it receives all the things it needs to germinate and to grow. Okay, so with everything we've talked about today, all those different seeds, all the different ways they disperse, okay, you are going to be able to fill out on this page right here. And I'm also going to post a couple other videos that will talk more about seed dispersal. But here you're going to show 3 different seeds and how they are dispersed. Okay, 3 different ways seeds can be dispersed. So don't do only seeds that are in the air. Do maybe one in the air, one in the water, one that gets stuck to your clothes. Okay, but we talked about 5 different ones. Remember, we talked about if they're yummy and they get eaten. We talked about the ones that stick onto clothes and animal fur and things because they've got little hooks. We've talked about the ones that are carried by the wind, carried by the water, and flung from the plant. Okay, so those are the ones we've talked about, and you're going to show 3 of them in here, 3 different seeds and how they are dispersed. Okay, and then on here, you get to draw the life cycle of our Brassica rapa plant. Okay, so I want you to go back and think about the different stages we've seen the plant in. Okay, we started with the seed, and it sprouted and began to grow, and just got the leaves first, and then it ended up with flowers, and then it ended up with the seed pods. Okay, so those are the 4 main steps that our plants have gone through, and then we're going back to getting the seeds. And like I said, I will post a video next week that shows those seeds and the harvesting of the seeds. Okay, and hopefully you have been working on these little pictures and posting or looking at the postings I've put of pictures of how the plant has been changing. And this is just such a fun record of this journey we've been on together. Okay, so thank you so much for going on this journey with me. I love this unit with plants, and I'm so glad I got to do it with you. Okay, so go hunting for seeds. See if you can decide how the adaptations for that plant allow the seeds to travel and grow in new places. And finish those last couple pages in your seed journal and watch for the video coming of the process of harvesting the seeds so that we are ready next year for the next group of first graders to be able to plant seeds and watch them grow as well. Okay. Thanks again for joining me on this journey.